Since 1815, one group of soldiers has fought in every major British conflict. The World Wars, the Falklands, Afghanistan, Iraq. They've earned 26 Victoria Crosses, the highest military honour the British Crown can bestow. They are, by any measurement, among the most effective infantry soldiers in modern history. And most of you watching this couldn't name a single one of them, couldn't name a single battle they won, couldn't pick their insignia out of a lineup. They're called the Gurkhas, and the fact that you don't know their story is one of the biggest blind spots in military history. We're going to fix that right now. It starts with a war the British expected to win in weeks. In November 1814, the East India Company sent roughly 30,000 troops in 4 columns against the Kingdom of Nepal. The Gorkha Kingdom had been expanding across the Himalayan foothills, bumping up against British territorial interests, and the company figured a quick show of force would settle things. Standard colonial playbook. Roll in heavy, accept to surrender, draw some new borders on a map. That isn't what happened. Nepalese hill fighters, drawn from the Magar, Gurung, Rai and Limbu communities of Nepal's middle hills, tore that playbook apart. At the fortress of Kalanga, a garrison of around 600 Nepalese soldiers under Commander Balbhadra Kunwar held off a British force several times its size for over a month. They inflicted devastating casualties. They fought with a tactical intelligence and a raw, grinding ferocity that British officers had almost never encountered in their colonial campaigns. And when the garrison finally withdrew, not surrendered, withdrew, they did so with their honour intact and their enemies' respect permanently earned. Here's the thing that separates this from every other colonial skirmish. The British erected a memorial obelisk at Kalanga, a monument to the enemy they'd just fought. That doesn't happen. That never happens. The British eventually won through sheer weight of numbers and resources. The Treaty of Sugauli was signed on December 2nd, 1815, ratified by March 4th, 1816. Nepal ceded roughly a third of its territory. But buried in the aftermath was a provision more consequential than any borderline. The British secured the right to recruit Nepalese soldiers. The first Gurkha units, initially called Naziri battalions, meaning friendly, were raised in 1815 before the treaty was even formally ratified. Those Naziri battalions would eventually evolve into the first King George V's own Gurkha rifles, establishing a direct lineage from those earliest recruits to the soldiers serving today. Think about that decision for a second. The British fought these men, got bloodied, and concluded, we'd rather have them on our side. It might be the most extraordinary personnel decision in military history. Lieutenant Frederick Young, who raised one of the earliest Gurkha battalions, reportedly confronted a captured Nepalese soldier. "I was not afraid of you. Why were you not afraid of us?" The soldier's answer has echoed for 2 centuries. "I am not afraid of you either, but your cannons I cannot fight." And from that moment, 1815, the chain has never broken. The Indian Mutiny of 1857, where Gurkha regiments stayed loyal when much of the Bengal army revolted. Both world wars, the Malayan Emergency, Borneo, the Falklands, Kosovo, Sierra Leone, Iraq, Afghanistan. 210 years of continuous service. No comparable record exists anywhere in modern military history. But before we move through those 2 centuries, we need to talk about the blade. Because you can't understand the Gurkhas without understanding their weapon. The kukri is a curved Nepalese knife, typically 14 to 18 inches in overall length, with a distinctive inward curving edge and a notch near the base called the cho. It's forward weighted, centre of gravity toward the tip, which gives it the chopping force of a small axe packed into a blade you can carry on your belt. In mechanical terms, it's one of the most efficient close combat cutting tools ever designed, capable of severing limbs in a single stroke. Every Gurkha soldier carries one, issued as part of their kit. But calling it kit is like calling a samurai's katana a kitchen knife. In Nepalese culture, the kukri is a tool, a ceremonial object, a spiritual artifact, and a marker of identity all at once. Kids in Gurkha communities grow up watching their fathers and grandfathers use kukris for everything from clearing brush to butchering goats. It's the first tool they learn and the last weapon they'll reach for. You've probably heard the legend. A kukri, once drawn, can't be returned to its sheath without drawing blood. The reality is more nuanced. It's a cultural ideal. It refers specifically to drawing the blade in anger, in combat. Not every time it leaves the scabbard. What it really means is simpler and more terrifying. If the kukri comes out in a fight, the fight is going to end. Now let me tell you about Bishnu Shrestha, a retired Gurkha corporal, and what happened on a passenger train in West Bengal in 2010. Armed bandits boarded the train and started robbing passengers. When they attempted to assault an 18-year-old girl, Shrestha intervened. One man, one kukri, against a gang that outnumbered him by dozens. He was wounded in the fighting. Didn't matter. The attackers fled. The Indian Army awarded him the Sena Medal for bravery. Indian Railways gave him a cash award. A retired soldier, alone, armed with a curved blade. And that was enough. But the kukri stories that matter most come from actual battlefields. And the first Gurkha to ever receive a Victoria Cross didn't earn his by killing. He earned it by refusing to let other men die. September 25th, 1915, the Battle of Loos, northern France. Rifleman Kulbir Thapa, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Queen Alexandra's own Gurkha Rifles. Wounded during the assault, he found a badly injured soldier of the 2nd Leicestershire Regiment lying in no man's land, exposed to fire from both sides. What Kulbir Thapa did next took the entire night and the following day. He carried wounded men to safety, one at a time, across the shattered ground between British and German trenches. 2 wounded Gurkha comrades first, then back again, a 3rd trip into that killing ground for the Leicestershire soldier. 3 trips into no man's land, wounded, alone, under continuous fire that had already killed men all around him. The citation was published in the London Gazette on the 7th of December, 1915. Born in Palpa, Nepal in 1889, Kulbir Thapa held the lowest enlisted rank, rifleman. He wasn't trained for heroism, he simply wouldn't leave the wounded behind. And his story should be as well known as any act of valour on the Western Front. It isn't. Most histories of Loos don't mention him. Until 30 seconds ago, you'd never heard his name. Over 100,000 Gurkhas served in the First World War. They fought at Gallipoli, in Mesopotamia, in Palestine, on the Western Front, standing in the same mud, under the same artillery, against the same machine guns as their British counterparts. By the end of the war, over 20,000 had been killed or wounded, and the next war would ask even more. In March 1944, the Japanese army launched Operation Ugo. The objective was the invasion of British India itself. 3 Japanese divisions, roughly 85,000 troops, would push through the mountainous jungle of Burma into northeast India, targeting the logistics hub at Imphal and the hill station at Kohima. If they broke through, they'd sever the supply line to China, collapse British authority in eastern India, and potentially trigger a mass uprising against the Raj. This wasn't a sideshow. This was the war in Asia, balanced on a knife's edge. Most people know D-Day, Stalingrad, Midway. Almost nobody knows Imphal. And Imphal was, by its conclusion, the single greatest land defeat the Japanese army ever suffered. Gurkha battalions were everywhere in the defence. 4th Corps, under Lieutenant General Geoffrey Scoones, included the 17th, 20th and 23rd Indian Infantry Divisions, all containing Gurkha units. The fighting was some of the most savage of the entire Second World War. Mountainous terrain, dense jungle and bamboo, ravines, monsoon rains starting in May, visibility measured in yards, supply by air only. Positions changing hands in vicious close-quarter attacks, often at night, often hand-to-hand. At Bishanpur, at Nungshigum Hill, at Shanam Saddle, names that mean nothing to Western audiences, but that were, in the spring of 1944, the fulcrum on which the entire Burma campaign turned, Gurkha riflemen held. The Japanese had outrun their supply lines. Their troops were starving, but they still fought with legendary tenacity, and holding those positions cost everything. 23rd June 1944, Mogaon, Burma. Rifleman Tul Bahadur Pun, 3rd Battalion, 6th Gurkha Rifles. His section was attacking a Japanese position across 30 yards of open ground raked by machine gun fire. Every other man in the section was killed or wounded, every single one. Tul Bahadur Pun continued forward alone, charged through a storm of fire, killed 3 Japanese soldiers, put 5 more to flight, captured 2 machine guns and their crews, held the position solo until support arrived, Victoria Cross. 3 days later, June 26, 1944, Bishanpur, in the heart of Imphal itself. Agan Singh Rai, 2nd Battalion, 5th Royal Gurkha Rifles, led his section in a charge against 2 Japanese machine gun positions, storming them one after another, killing the crews in hand-to-hand combat under fire so intense his citation described it as carried out with grueling coolness. And then there's Banbagta Gurung, March 1945, during the advance through Burma that the defence of Imphal made possible. He cleared 5 Japanese foxholes one by one. When his rifle jammed at close quarters, he killed the occupant with his kukri. 5 positions, alone. His VC citation reads almost like an understatement. When Operation Yugo finally collapsed, roughly 53,000 of the 85,000 Japanese troops committed were casualties, killed, wounded, or dead from disease and starvation. The Japanese 15th Army ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. The British official history called it probably the greatest defeat the Japanese army suffered in its entire history. The men who fought the Burma campaign called it the Forgotten War. That name has proven tragically accurate. The Gurkhas who bled on those hillsides have been doubly forgotten, once as part of a forgotten theatre, and again as individuals whose contributions got absorbed into the generic phrase British and Indian forces. Fast forward. 2nd of April 1982. Argentina invades the Falkland Islands. The British assemble a task force. Among the units sailing south, 1st Battalion, 7th Duke of Edinburgh's own Gurkha Rifles, 17GR, as part of 5th Infantry Brigade. They shipped out on the QE2, requisitioned as a troop carrier. What happened in the Falklands tells the Gurkha story from a completely different angle. Not just combat effectiveness, psychological dominance. The 17GR was tasked with the assault on Mount William in the final push towards Stanley. Argentine soldiers had been told, by their own officers according to multiple accounts, that Gurkhas were coming. The reputation preceded the soldiers. Some Argentine troops had been told the Gurkhas were headhunters. Others heard they took no prisoners. Whether every specific claim was documented or embellished matters less than the measurable outcome. When the Gurkhas advanced on Mount William, Argentine forces broke and fled before full contact was even made. They didn't wait to be beaten. They ran because they knew who was coming. Think about that for a second. An army that surrenders not because it's been defeated, but because of who's walking toward them. That isn't just military effectiveness. That's 2 centuries of reputation arriving on a hillside in the South Atlantic, and an enemy deciding they'd rather take their chances with anyone else. Now bring it to the present. Afghanistan, 2010. Acting Sergeant Diprasad Pun, 1st Battalion, Royal Gurkha Rifles. Manning a checkpoint alone at night when Taliban fighters launched a coordinated assault on his position. What followed was a one-man defense that sounds invented, but is documented and officially recognized. Pun fought off the assault using his machine gun, his SA-80 rifle, 400 rounds of ammunition, 17 grenades, and a claymore mine. When an insurgent climbed the wall of his compound and appeared directly above him, and his ammunition was spent, Pun grabbed the tripod of his machine gun and used it as a club. He fought for 15 minutes against a force that attacked from multiple directions, and he held. The position did not fall. He was awarded the Conspicuous Gallantry Cross, second only to the Victoria Cross in the British honours system. And unless you're a military history enthusiast with a very specific interest, you've never heard of him. His name doesn't appear in any mainstream documentary. No film has been made about that night. Which brings us to the question the whole script has been building toward. Why don't you know any of this? It's not because the information doesn't exist. It's because of where the Gurkhas sit in the architecture of how military history gets told. The Burma campaign, where Gurkhas were decisive, is the most underrepresented major theatre of the Second World War. Hollywood has produced dozens of films about the European and Pacific theatres. 0 major films about Imphal. The Gurkhas served within the British and Indian Army structure, meaning their achievements get credited to the larger unit. British forces captured the position, rather than identified as Gurkha-specific. No major Western film has ever centred on the Gurkhas. Compare that to the SAS, the Navy SEALs, forces with their own Netflix series, their own video game franchises. And there's something else. Something uncomfortable. The story of Nepalese men fighting for a colonial power is narratively complicated for modern audiences. It doesn't fit neatly into any box, so it gets skipped. And the skip becomes a habit, and the habit becomes an erasure, and the erasure becomes a 200-year credit gap that you didn't even know existed until right now. Today, roughly 4,000 Gurkhas serve in the British Army as part of the Brigade of Gurkhas, with the Royal Gurkha Rifles as the primary infantry unit. They're stationed in the UK and in Brunei. They are currently serving, right now. Every year in Pokhara, Nepal, at the British Gurkha Recruitment Depot, over 25,000 young men compete for around 200 to 400 places. The selection includes the Doko race, running uphill, carrying a 25-kilogram wicker basket for a set distance within a brutal time limit. Families in Nepal's hill communities train their sons for years for this single chance. The acceptance rate makes Harvard look casual. And the men who pass carry a motto with them for the rest of their lives. Kafarhunu Banda Marnu Ramro. Better to die than be a coward. Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, who led India's armed forces in the 1971 war, said it plainly. If a man says he is not afraid of dying, he is either lying or is a Gurkha. So here's what you need to take with you. 210 years of continuous service. Every major British conflict since 1815. 26 Victoria Crosses, 13 awarded to Gurkha soldiers directly, 13 to British officers serving with Gurkha units. Over 100,000 Gurkhas served in World War I alone. over 20,000 killed or wounded. They were central to what the British official history called the greatest defeat the Japanese army ever suffered. They made an enemy surrender in the Falklands without a full engagement. They're still serving today. Kulbir Thapa, who crawled into no man's land 3 times at Luz.
Tul Bahadur Pun, who charged a machine gun position alone at Mogayung.
Lachiman Gurung, who fought off 200 Japanese soldiers with one functioning arm at 19 years old. Agan Singh Rai, who stormed 2 positions with grueling coolness at Bishenpur. Banbagta Gurung, who cleared 5 foxholes and killed a man with his kukri when his rifle jammed. Diprasad Pun, who held a checkpoint alone against a Taliban assault with whatever he could grab. Those are their names. Now you know them. Subscribe for more stories like this.